Well, Tanya, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Carlin.
Yes, absolutely. We will have you on whenever you want. So we do appreciate you coming back. And you have a little bit of an announcement. You've announced something just recently.
I did. I am running for re-election for mayor here in the town of Okotoks.
Now, good for you. That's the last time that we met. I think back in April. I just assumed that you were running again. I made a lot of assumptions. I think I'm learning a few things as I go with the podcast as to the way things roll out. But why on earth do you want to run again?
It's a multitude of reasons, but I think what it really boils down to is I genuinely love my community, and I feel I have something to offer in this seat to our community. And yeah, it comes down to the fact that I love the community, and the role of mayor, it's a challenging job, and I think I have stood up to that challenge, and I have a few things that I would like to see us accomplish yet, and I don't think the work's done.
Absolutely. Well, we will circle back to the things that you want to accomplish. But in the your last term, what are some of the things that you were proud that you accomplished?
Oh, you know what? There's really actually a really long list. But I think the biggest one is we actually got a deal on a water pipeline. We created a partnership with Foothills County, which we were struggling with that in previous terms. We created a clear direction. Anybody that's been listening to the conversation on water, we've had multitude of different ideas and solutions and paths that we have followed. And so we executed on a path and we secured grant funding, from the province. We've seen a significant amount of money invested from different levels of government in this last term. But that water pipeline and seeing it actually going in the ground
Mhm.
and feeling like this might be the first campaign since I started running in 2013 that I won't be talking about water.
Right. Well, this year it's funny because I think the last time that there wasn't really any major water restrictions, and correct me if I'm wrong, was the last like 4 years ago when there was a political run. I remember that was very interesting that there was no water restrictions that year. And then this year it seems like Mother Nature's on your side because nobody's talking about water because nobody's had to water their grass this year.
Yeah,
Phenomenal.
well, and again, I come from the philosophy of we actually don't have water restrictions in Okotoks. We have a water conservation policy. And we really come from the lens of what's the highest and best use of water. And I
Mhm.
will say it time and time again, drinking water and having it there for human health and bathing and all the things that we need inside will be my number one priority. Green lawns will not. And so we manage it in that regard. And we've been blessed this year. Well, blessed and tortured with a lot of rain this year on
Yes.
both sides. It's that
Yeah.
double-edged sword, right? Like I see wetlands and reservoirs and dugouts that I haven't seen in years that are full to the brim with water. And that's fabulous because it's really regenerated our aquifer. And I don't think I can't even remember a time at the end of August that the Sheep River has been this high. Like you could still raft down the Sheep River right now, which is uncharacteristic for
For
August.
sure. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and there's been, well, a couple of weeks ago, it was a little bit scary. I took our
Yeah,
dog down there and just like, whew, didn't even really want her to go in because she could
yeah,
go for a float and be down quite a ways down that river.
yeah.
Yeah, it
It's still
is
moving pretty good.
certainly nice that we're not dealing with forest fires. Like we're not dealing with the smoke. I know that there are forest fires going around in the area, but we're not dealing with that this year. And yeah, not concerned about things burning up too fast around here. So
We've
that's
certainly
awesome.
been in a good pocket for weather here in our area.
Yeah, and just for the record, for those people listening, just because we are getting a new pipeline doesn't mean that we're going to be able to open the floodgates with our lawns and water whenever we want. It's still going to be a water conservation
Yeah, our
policy.
outdoor watering schedule will remain in place even though we're getting a new water pipeline and new water source from the Bow. That water conservation and outdoor watering um, policy will remain in place for
Right. Well,
perpetuity.
you even look at the boat, right? Like
Hmm.
before the rain started happening, the levels of the boat were very concerning. So this was awesome that we've had so much rain. Now, as we shift gears a little bit, no doubt there's always the negative. There's always people complaining about something. There's always people complaining about taxes. They're complaining about services. There also is a lot of potentially misinformation. And there's also things that no doubt are true that are floating around in regards to taxes and services. That's always going to be, no doubt, an election issue. And right now, um, our taxes increased 4.2%. I believe it's 4.2%. And some people, like, you go onto social media and different things like that, and people are posting on there and they're saying they're feeling as though they're not getting the same amount of services they used to, even though they're paying more money. How would you respond to
Well, I think there's a few things. I think it is around recognizing that how the town has a budget, it's no different in a lot of ways than your household budget. We've all seen increasing pressures from inflation, rising costs. So the same services that you bought, 5 years ago and you're still buying today, they're not the same price anymore. You don't go in and buy a carton of milk for the same price, or eggs for the same price. Costs have gone up in general. And so, first of all, right off the get go, the town has experienced that too. We still have to buy, paper and, sand and gravel and salt and all those things, chlorine, everything like that. And we have seen an increasing escalation of those same supplies that we still need to deliver the same service to residents. So we've seen that escalation as well. So I can appreciate that services have remained, well, and I won't say they've remained the same, but we are paying a higher cost to deliver the same service. As an example, and it's actually that I won't use this example because it's actually water and that's utility based. But snow clearing, as an example, the core material that we use to ice roads, put gravel down, maintain equipment, all of that, we've seen an escalation of those costs by over 25%. And so we've got to collect that somewhere. And as government, that comes from taxes, even though it's the same service we're delivering.
So I guess, and I've also seen, like, online where it feel like, because we have seen substantial increases in our property values over the years, right? Like, and so I think I know council said that it was basically 4.2, but if we were to calculate the increase year over year, and I could be wrong on this, but really the increase of taxes is closer to 8%, with the increase of property tax plus the 4.2% year over year, right? So that is a substantial, and I know that not every year property tax or housing is going to increase like it did last year. But how does council and yourself kind of respond to a question like that?
Yeah, they're kind of two separate pieces of the puzzle, right? So our assessment values is a whole independent thing. It's run through a provincial process. The provincial government lays out how assessments are done. They're done as of July 1st of the prior year. That's where your assessment is based on. And what the assessment does is it takes in it goes, we've sent the tax rate at 4.5%. So it figures out what our total assessment for the community is, and then it determines what share of that you need to pay based on your assessed value, right? So if you've got a higher value of home than the average home price, you're going to pay a bigger percentage of that. But the assessment really determines how much you are going to pay of the tax pool that we need to collect. We determine how much money we need to collect from taxes separate from knowing what assessments are. So they're two independent processes that come together to create the formula of what your bill is going to be. So we determine in November usually, and there's a whole process leading up to November, but we finalize it in November, what our budget is going to be for the next year. And in there, we go through and we say, okay, we need to collect X amount of dollars for taxes to cover everything that needs to be done over this next year or next period of time. And then the assessment drives what you owe. But there's lots of data out there. And if you go and you look at it, what we're collecting per person has remained relatively flat, or per household has remained relatively flat over this course of period. Yes, we've seen an increase, but we've also seen more people come. So it actually hasn't changed significantly, that cost per person. It has climbed. But I think the piece that nobody talks about is we've seen increases in this last 3 years. But nobody goes and looks at what was done the previous 4 or the previous 8. And, I'm on record from I was on council in 2013, as of 2013, so 2013 to 2021. Many budget arguments I made. We are keeping our taxes artificially low, and eventually we're going to need to pay for the stuff that needs to get done, and somebody's going to need to pay that bill. And that's what happened this term. Is that things that have been kicked down the road and were coming due, this council said, we're done with kicking things down the road. They need to happen now. And I'll use fire as a perfect example of that. We built a new fire hall, the South Fire Hall, I don't know, in 2016, I think that went in, 2017 maybe, but we didn't staff it. So we had this huge investment and we didn't staff it. We didn't have an appropriate fire response out of the South Hall. Council in this, over the course of this last 4 years, we've hired 12 firefighters, 12 of them. And that's just to give us, the base level of fire response in our community. And you'll have seen we approved here a while back a standard of care for fire, standard of coverage for fire. And that's kind of our whole risk management plan of how we're going to keep and maintain our fire force to make sure that we've got a safe and effective response. And what that means is that we've got enough firefighters on site when a fire truck arrives to start a response, keep our crews safe, and to keep our communities safe. And as we grow, we're going to need to continue that. But that's a perfect example of we didn't invest before. And so we weren't doing it strategically along the way. Came to this council, and this council chose not to kick it down the line and said, no, we're getting to a base. We're going to start.
Right. So how would Okotoks, now obviously we can't really compare ourselves to Calgary because we do not have that same tax base, but how does Okotoks compare to other cities like ourselves, like Airdrie, Cochrane, Chestermere for taxes? And I have no idea. I've never looked into it.
Yeah. It's really actually hard to do a comparison. People do it, but I don't encourage them to do it. And the reason I don't is because there's a number out there of what everybody pays for taxes. And so it's easy to say, you live in Airdrie and you pay $3,000 and I live in Okotoks and I pay $4,000. And it sounds like I pay more, but we need to also compare what that housing price is, what the average house price is in each of those communities. So I'll use Canmore because it's a perfect example. Canmore's taxes in the scheme of things is lower than ours here. One, they have a bigger commercial industrial base than we do, but Canmore's average house price is 1.1 million. So to go there just to buy a base, you have to have $1.1 million to do that. So it's really hard to compare when you're sitting in a home that's $600,000 in Okotoks to those things. So the second thing is that even though we're in the same region, we all deliver different services. So as an example for Okotoks, some of the things that we do is, we have an on-demand transit system. We have our own recreation center, and we manage that. So we staff it and we do all of that. Cochrane farms that out. They have another group that does it. So it's a different fee. They're not paying for the same kind of staffing. They're paying for it in a different way, but it's not an apple to apple comparison. On utilities, we manage our sewer and our water. Everybody else in the region is connected, whether it's water and sewer or water only or sewer only, to the city of Calgary. So they're not managing that same infrastructure like we are, because they've got an agreement and a connection with another municipality. So those apple to apple comparisons of services is not the same across municipalities.
So what cities? I didn't know that. Is that Cochrane and Airdrie and Chestermere that are
Airdrie
tapped
is
into?
Airdrie is water and sewer, if I remember correctly. Chestermere is water and Cochrane is sewer.
Mhm.
Don't quote
Mhm.
me on that, but
Yeah.
there's a combination of different things, right? Um, so that apple to apple comparison. So you've got to look at average home price, what services are you getting? And we all do some different things. The bucket is similar, but it's not the same.
For sure. So you're no doubt going to be going door to door. You
Hmm.
have no idea. Or do we? I'm assuming, again, today's August the 25th that we're recording this. Is anybody running against you?
Currently, at this moment in time, no.
No. Okay. But that certainly can change because they
Yep.
have until September
22nd.
2nd to get their names in there, and that goes for council members as well. And it's nice to see that we're starting to see more and more people step up to run for council. I think last time, well, when I was talking to Rachel on the podcast, I'm not sure if anybody did, but that was still quite early. But now I think, what are we at, 5 or 6,
I
something
think it
like
was
that?
5 the last time I checked, but I've
Okay.
seen a couple come out over the last couple of days. I haven't checked to see if the website's got those.
Right. So with that, going door to door, no doubt, and I think you've kind of explained it a little bit, but I want to go back to this point because some of the tax dollars that are being spent, like, yes, our tax dollars are going up, but we're not, the average person on a day-to-day basis driving around Okotoks isn't necessarily going to see where their monies have gone to. For example, like you said, the firefighters, right? But no
Mhm.
doubt, you're going to answer the door, and you're going to have Mr. Okotokian answer the door, and he's going to make a statement similar to, like, if services haven't diminished, why do I feel that I'm paying more but getting less? How would you answer that?
I will probably travel with, so we created a receipt of how your taxes are split for an average home, and you can find it on the website. And I will take that because it is really hard to have a conversation around just a tax dollar. I always take it back to value for money. So, and the value of what the receipt does is it shows you how much you pay for certain things. So in our annual report, you can kind of sort of see it there. There's this
Hmm.
lovely receipt. But for an average house, you pay for the year, you pay $512 for RCMP and municipal enforcement. Do you think that's a good value or poor value? And if you think it's a good value, then we move on to fire. For fire, you're paying $486 a year, not a month, a year
Yeah.
for fire response. And we really you need to go through that, and you need to look at it when you really start to break it down to the things that are covered in there of, is that an effective use of the money that you spend? Parks is our next highest spend. We spend $339 a year on parks. That's our pathways, that's the playgrounds, that's the green spaces. Is that a good investment? And that's the piece that as mayor, I always ask myself when we start looking at where we're going to put money of, am I still delivering? And are we still delivering what is deemed a good value for the dollars we pay? And that I think is the piece people need to understand. It's easy to get mad at a tax rate,
Sure.
but you really have to come back and bring it back to value. And I will talk value because I'm not saying everybody thinks they're getting good value. So I'm fine with that. But then let's talk about what things you don't think you need. And when you get into that, or what things you think aren't delivering you value. But when we get into that, it's always about the things they don't use. Well, I don't want you to spend any money on recreation because I never use the recreation facility.
Mhm.
I don't want you to spend any money on transit because I don't take the bus. But the thing with council, and I think that is anybody that's looking to run, and why I am grateful to have the opportunity to be at this job, is it's not just about you as the individual or me as the individual, is about how do we actually build community for everyone in our community. And so that they all have the same equitable, I won't say equal, but equitable access to it. And so there are families in our community that choose to only have one vehicle. So how do we make sure that they both can still get to work though, and create that equitable access? And they're choosing to only have one vehicle, so they have lower wear and tear on our road system and our systems in that regard, because they're not both driving. So, we need to think about it in that broader piece. If you don't use recreation, but I said to the community, I'm going to get rid of recreation. Well, what are the knock-ons of that? Of not having all the youth in our facilities active for our seniors? What's the knock-on of that to, crime in our community, boredom, all of those social connections, well-being, and overall the health system, which we're not responsible. I just want to make sure everybody's clear. Municipal is not responsible for the health system,
Yeah, yeah.
but we have an input into it by making sure we provide activities and programming for the health of our community.
Right. So when that does come, because I know that housing affordability is certainly on the top of the list of yourself and council. What are the steps that are being taken place for affordability?
Affordability is a complex puzzle,
It is.
because there's a multitude of things that drive into that, and municipal government isn't going to solve it by itself. We talk taxes. From all the taxes that you pay as a resident, of the dollar you pay, 10 cents of that at the most is coming to a municipality. The rest is going to provincial or federal levels. So when we talk about municipalities being able to help influence affordability, well, I've only got 10% of the pie that I get to play with.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the only level of government, or we're the only level of government that has to balance our budget. So I need to deliver things to you and still be a balanced budget.
Sorry. Can I cut you off? What
Yeah,
did you say? You're the only, like, municipalities are the only ones that have to balance their budgets?
correct. Yeah, we cannot run a deficit budget. So we're required by the Municipal Government Act that we must balance our budget. We can't run a deficit like the provincial and the federal level of government. And
I didn't
so
know that.
yeah. So, when we've got only 10 cents and we have to balance our budget, that's where you see municipalities making these trade-offs between, proactive maintenance, like you're seeing in our community this year. We've got a ton of construction happening, and much of that is actually proactive maintenance of, we've got systems that are getting close to failing, and we're going to deal with it before they fail.
Right.
But you see communities trading that off because construction is annoying. Underground infrastructure, nobody sees. So to your point of, they can't look out and see that we've made that investment because we drive over it
Mm-hmm.
every day. Nobody thinks about all the pipes in the roads that are there to deliver water, to take away sewer, any of that infrastructure that exists. We don't think about it on a day-to-day basis. But that proactive investment versus putting the nice shiny thing that you can see above ground, right? It's easy to build. Well, I won't say it's easy because it's not easy, but to build a recreation center, that's the shiny toy everybody sees.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it costs just as much, if not more, than putting that pipe in the ground.
For sure. Okay, so here's a question, and this kind of stems from our last conversation, and I guess just thinking about it. So new development. How much does new development help pay for old infrastructure? Like, does that become part of the equation as well?
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily pay for old infrastructure. So there's an analogy and it's not an analogy, but there's a saying that growth pays for growth. So we charge what's called an offsite levy. And so infrastructure that's required for us to grow. So expanding pipes as an example, or having to twin 32nd Street, because we need that because we're growing as a community. Offsite levies will contribute to that or pay for that, depending. There's a formula of how much of this relates to needed for the new growth and how much of it relates to supporting the community that currently exists. And then they figure out what percentage is owed by each. But those offsite levies contribute to those projects. So we have a full list of every year we go through of, okay, here's what they are, here's our estimates on cost, and offsite levies contribute into that as we go with growth. So in essence, they're paying for that as they grow. Okotoks is in the process of re-looking at offsite levies and and how we do them. We're not there. We haven't got that completely changed yet, but we are definitely moving towards a shift in how we do offsite levies.
Mm-hmm.
In this last year, last term, our council was one of the first ones in the province that implemented an offsite levy for recreation, as an example. So that was a new addition to the Municipal Government Act from the province. They added that in there that allowed us to collect offsite levies for things like recreation centers, fire stations, and I want to say police, but I'm going to say police, fire, and recreation, but recreation and fire for sure. And we added that into our offsite levy for recreation. So as we grow, they're contributing into what we need to do as an expansion for recreation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that's good. Well,
And I think the other piece about growth, I'll just add another piece in there with growth, is one of the things that as council's been a big focus for us, and that is around our economic development and economic diversity. So one of the challenges that Okotoks has had is we're primarily a residential community. So that means all the services that we deliver into the community is paid mostly by our residential home base, where a lot of our peers have a more even split, or a better focus on the commercial and the industrial side of their base. And that's one of the things this council, we've done a lot of work around. How do we set up that market? How do we make it easier to do business in Okotoks? We approved an area structure plan that is 100% all economic, commercial, industrial, light industrial development. That's the first in its kind in Okotoks. We've never approved a plan that is just focused on industrial and economic or commercial. And so we've done that because we see we need to diversify that. And the reason you need to diversify that is, as a resident, I pay $1. As a business, they pay $1.66 in taxes. So when we have more of that business and more of that light industrial commercial, we're collecting 66 cents more from them in a tax base, which offsets what we as residents pay. So we're a great community. So if you've got friends out there that want to do business and they want to move to Okotoks, they should bring their business here, and we've got a spot for them.
Yeah, because that whole area just north of Costco. I can't believe what's going on out there. How quickly that went up. And like, what's the vision for that area? Like, is it gonna, like, because it doesn't seem necessarily like it's gonna be retail stores going in there.
There's a bit of a combination in there. There's some industrial warehouse type space. The foundry, they've just started, they're ready to go, but they're selling their spaces, which is good for Okotoks as well. We hear a lot of the spaces that have been built in the past are lease type spaces, and I hear from a lot of our residents and small business owners that they want to buy their space. So the foundry is a great development because they're for sale units. You can go in there and you can buy that space, and it's at a spot right now that you can kind of get to dictate the size of what it's going to be and what the light makeup is going to be, that because the outer shell is the only thing that's up right now. So seeing more development in that. But I think that that's a good testament to the work that's been done by council and our administration team to make it easier to do business in Okotoks and bring that business in here, because we have seen a significant increase in the amount of commercial development, and we're seeing a significant interest from light industrial.
Right, for sure. Couple of things I just want to circle back on. And this one, I'm sure that it's a very sensitive question. Some people might jump all over me, but I think it's no doubt a question that's being asked, because it's and when it comes to low, affordable housing, I guess what no doubt you have heard and is a concern for for other people from Okotoks is just what that necessarily might mean. And I'm not saying that it's just um low income housing, but it can also be people that, because that are doing quite well, that cause issues, concerns to a community. But I'm just wondering, have you heard that as being a concern of people as to the DNA, the characteristics of our town, and how that potentially is shifting the mentality in our town a little bit?
Yeah, I have. So I think words that tend to get me excited, and not necessarily in a good way, is when conversations are about those people.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're all people. We're not those, them, it's not us versus them. In Okotoks, we're all Okotokians.
Mm-hmm.
And we all contribute to the vibe, the mentality, the culture in our community, every single one of us. But we need to recognize that not every single one of us is at the same level.
Mm-hmm.
I always equate to, the mud bog. I'm sure people have seen it, the mud bog that's there, and you got the big Newfoundland dog, and he's only got mud up to his knees, and then you got the little corgi, and his whole body's covered in mud.
Mm-hmm.
It's the exact same sort of thing. We're in the same mud bog, but we're not all the same. And that for me is why we need housing diversity, because the house that makes sense for you might not be the same house that makes sense for me, but I want to be in Okotoks and so do you. And so
Mm-hmm.
how do we create the opportunities that everybody can be here? And I'm a huge believer in not so much in handouts, because I actually don't believe that families that are struggling or are in low income housing, I don't generally believe that they're looking for a handout. They're looking for a hand up.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to get onto stable ground. And so it does require us to invest in housing that's across that whole continuum. And, we're very blessed. We work with West Winds Communities. They're our housing provider in this region, and they can tell you they see families transition from below market housing to market housing, because they've been able to stabilize, and so I don't really believe, and we don't have the data that shows it, that just because we put up apartment buildings or just because you have below market housing, it doesn't increase crime. People increase crime.
Mm-hmm.
And, but by having a community that is diligent, that's connected, it also decreases crime. So if you know who your neighbors are, if you know the vehicles that frequent your neighborhood, it allows each of us as residents to take a bit of a shared responsibility of, something doesn't seem right here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to phone municipal enforcement, or I'm going to phone bylaw and say, this seems odd, and we've seen that in our community of an increase in reporting of information. And it has resulted in us being able to get rid of a few different drug rings, I'll say, but crime rings
Mm-hmm.
in that have been either in our community or have been coming through our community. But because our community reports it, we've been able to start collecting that data. I mentioned that earlier, is that was one of the things that I was proud of. Our council really focused on making data-based decisions. And that required us as an organization to get better at collecting data and being able to report on the data. And that is a huge move that we've done. And our RCMP and municipal enforcement are doing a great job, fire as well, of having data for us to drive the decisions of where we need to be investing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long answer to your
No,
question.
and that's a great answer. And I guess I would love to know the stats, because I feel that this is the way that you were kind of hinting at is, do criminals commit crime? And I know this is like, it can't be a blanket answer, uh, but if someone's going to commit a crime, do they do it in the community they're living in? I would assume chances are they probably try to go away. In the fall, for example, last fall, I had my vehicle stolen out of my driveway, right in town. Were those people from Okotoks? Absolutely not. They came in from the city. They, they were well known because they went right up and down the entire street, um, and, cleaned out vehicles and stole a vehicle that just happened to be mine. And yeah, it wasn't people from Okotoks. It was coming from Calgary.
Yeah, and, and I think that that's where we each have a responsibility, right? Make sure you're locking your vehicle. Don't make it easy. And I'm not saying that you did it. I'm not saying you did, but how
I
do we
left my
lock?
vehicle open.
Yeah, so locking our vehicles, because I hear this all the time. I regularly meet with our CMP and our municipal enforcement manager, and a lot of the stuff that we end up dealing with is absolutely crime of opportunity. So garages that were left open and they're in the backyard, and all of a sudden you come out and something's been taken out of the garage. Vehicles that have been left open. Our CMP do a lock it or lose it campaign, and they walk down a block and check car doors at
Yeah.
night. And then they leave a thing on the door saying, "Hey, this could have happened to you."
Yeah, so they lock up the vehicle for them then.
And so, I did a ride along, a great example. I did a ride along, and, these are the unseen things that our RCMP officers do in our community. But I did a ride along last year. I've got another one coming up. We were on the evening shift. It was like 12:45 or 11:45 at night. We were in Sandstone. We're driving down the street. House is completely dark. Garage doors wide open. And I can attest. I've seen myself do that, where you
Hmm.
go and you think you've done everything and you forget that you were out. And anyways, so the officer tried to go and close the garage door, because sometimes you can just hit the enter button and it'll close, right?
Yeah.
Well, it didn't. And so instead he's ringing the doorbell. 11:45 at night. I feel sorry for that family,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
somebody got out of bed.
Yeah.
But they were extremely grateful
Sure.
that that was the level of effort they made. So they are out in the community and they're watching for those things and trying to do the best job to help protect us as a community. But we each have a responsibility of locking our car doors. And my bugbear, and shameless saying, and if we would stop using our garages as storage units and actually store cars in them like they should be, all of those other pieces, it would take cars off the street,
Yeah.
and actually put them into secured garages. But that's a whole different conversation. We
For
could do a
sure.
whole show on that one,
Yeah,
Carlin.
yeah, absolutely. No, and I think you're right. Like, your guys' messaging certainly has been received by the community, in regards to reaching out to bylaw if there's an issue, if you see something concerning or whatever. Again, like the last time I reached out to them, there's a young gentleman walking down the street, not walking on the sidewalk, walking on the grass, but looking in every single car, right? And I just told bylaw which way he's headed, and they went. I don't know if they got him or whatever, but um, didn't commit a crime, but certainly was well on the way. But then there's also ways that we can use social media for positive things, because then I did post on Okotoks Facebook page. I don't know which one it was, and just say, hey, Air Ranch residents, be careful. This person has just entered the area and looking like he's headed your way. So, yeah, and it is about the community. We talked about that last time, and this is certainly
And I'm a big believer that a connected community. So we talk a lot about our small town identity, and the small town identity for me is about being connected. It's
mhm,
being connected to other people in the community, whether that's your neighbors, whether that's somebody across town. But the more of those connections we can create, the safer it creates the community. There's lots of data out there that the more connected a community is, the safer it is, because we look out for each other. And that is, of a good investment into community safety that costs us way, way less than a firefighter, a police force, a RCMP officer, a municipal enforcement officer does, is just being connected to your neighbors.
mhm.
If you know who is in your neighborhood and who they are, and have conversations with them, know who drives what vehicles, know the kids they have, it creates a very different connection in the community.
And that's absolutely something that we want to keep rolling as
Yeah.
Okotokians, and something that we're very proud of. So, well, thanks for your time. Um, the the election process, again, public service, as we talked about before, is um, It's difficult. It's not fun. It takes a special person. I know even doing the podcast and getting some negative feedback on the podcast or whatever, and I'm opening myself up to that, and I want that. I want the feedback, and that's the thing I really like about you, Tanya,
Mm.
is that you are there. You're present. You're reachable, which is crazy
Mhm.
at times, I think. Like we talked about last time, just the questions people are asking you. And yeah, you were the first guest that I had on the podcast, and you mentioned, and those words stayed with me as this is engagement. We're not always going to agree with each other. We're going to have different thoughts and feelings as to, well, my kids don't play hockey, so why are we building this hockey rink? My kids want to go to the library, so we're glad that we funded the. Do you know what I mean? Um, the diversity, but I think you explained yourself very, very well as we are trying to create Okotoks as the basically the full meal deal, the full package, something that your senior parents can move to town and feel connected. Your kids that are just starting out, maybe planning on having a family, that this is the perfect place for them, and here's the things that work for them here in this town, and I think that's why we all choose to live here. So I appreciate you. I appreciate your um openness. Like, you were very quick to say yes to the first podcast. You didn't know me from a hole in the ground, and yet you still were like, yeah, let's do it. That's awesome. You had no idea what angle I was going to come with, and that says a lot. Just the fact that I think you're willing to have those conversations when they're tough, when they're not easy, and someone sitting on the other side of the table may disagree with you, but you're still, because you've told me stories of how people come into the office and chew you out for something that wasn't you weren't even a council member at that time,
Yeah.
and you're dealing with a lot. So we do appreciate you. I guess it will be interesting to see if anybody steps up to run against you in the next few weeks, but we wish you the best of luck, and we do thank you for your service.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I love my job. I genuinely love my job, and I am open to having a dialogue with people. It doesn't mean we're going to agree, but
No.
I want to hear people's perspectives, and if they have another solution. I think the piece that many don't understand is that I don't get up every morning and nobody on council does, of with the first question of how can I piss off an Okotokian today. That isn't how I start my
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
And I really do believe I've tried to make the best decision that I can make for the community as a whole with the information I have at that time. Doesn't mean that every one of those decisions has been right. There's probably a
Hmm.
few that if I could go back, I would do something differently for different reasons and because I have more information today.
Hmm.
But I think what I've shown as mayor and what our team has shown is that when we don't get it right, we will step up and say, we didn't get this right. Here's how we're fixing it. And here's how we're going to change going forward. And we've done that a few times. And that's uncharacteristic for government. It's uncharacteristic for government leaders. But I know I don't have all the answers. And that's what is important about community, is that we do engage and provide feedback and provide ideas. I can come up with solutions. I'm great at creating a solution to a problem. But that doesn't mean that my solution is the best solution. But if I can hear solutions from 15 different people, or gosh forbid, everybody engaged, 30,000 people,
Hmm. Hmm.
we would have far better solutions because we will all have it. And it comes back to that equity. We're coming at it from a different perspective. We
Hmm.
see things differently. And so we need that engagement so that we do see the perspective of you, of me, of the guy down the street, of the person that just moved here, of the person that's lived here for 50 years. I have a perspective. I've lived in this community for 30 plus years. And so I understand growth. It's been growing since I moved here. We were
Hmm.
just over 5,000 people when I moved here. The composite was in a field by itself.
Right. Yeah.
The next closest building is where our fire station is now. That was the next closest building to the
Yeah,
composite
for
when
sure.
I moved into this community. And so growth is part of our fiber. And it's how we choose to respond to that growth, how we choose to manage it, how we choose to connect with the people that are coming because of growth, and create and instill in them what makes Okotoks awesome.
Hmm.
And it is about our connection. It really is. You know, if you haven't been to a Thursday night at the Plaza, the last one is this week. It's amazing to see community there. And we do so many great events that showcase our community.
Yeah, I was able to make it to the Beatles, and
Mm,
that was great. They
yeah.
were excellent, and there was a lot of people down there. And yeah, like even just look at the things that been going on this last month, right? The car
Hmm.
show, Chili Fest, Fleetwood Mac at the Dog Stadium. Uh, it's absolutely crazy. Thursday nights in the summer is just fabulous as well. You know, all that stuff to build the community. I have so many questions, so many different angles that we could go about this, but I do think we'll leave it at that.
We could talk for a long time, I'm sure, Carlin. So,
I know, and there's actually a couple questions I'm going to ask you once we stop recording. So,
anyways, well,
um,
I really appreciate you having me here. I'm excited to run for reelection, and
mhm,
I hope the community will put their faith in me again for another 4 years.
absolutely. No. And there has been, just for the record, there's been some changes. You can't just show up just to vote. You actually
Mhm.
have to go to www.voterlink.ab.ca or call 310-0000 to get registered.
Yeah, you do need to register. That's a change the provincial government put in place this year for the elections. There's all of that. You can find it on okotoks.ca/municipal election. All the details are there. But yes, I encourage everybody to get registered before election day on October 20th.
Awesome. Tanya, thank you so much.
You're welcome.